Hello everyone and welcome to the 11th internally screening Hooptober review, and today we are covering The Fly, directed by Canada's greatest export, David Cronenberg. It is pretty much iconic in every way. I've been meaning to watch this film for about a million years. Here I finally am. This is the second Cronenberg film we've covered and I've enjoyed both so far, I will say that. The Fly is a film starring Jeff Goldblum, Geena Davis and some other people. Also starring David Cronenberg as a gynecologist, which is the most Cronenberg thing.
Oh my god, I
maybe
didn't know that.
Yeah, maybe imaginable, you know, just the most Cronenberg thing. Yeah, it's a story of a man who makes maybe the worst decision a man has ever made while drunk. And you know, we've all been there, but I think this guy actually takes it to the fucking limit. And you know, this I think is still probably potentially Cronenberg's biggest success at the box office. This film was surprisingly successful and is not just a cult classic. I would say this is probably just a classic. It reached a level of mainstream attention I don't think he's ever quite managed in the same way, and it set a young Jeff Goldblum's career off to an excellent start. Absolutely. I know this wasn't the first film he was in or anything, but this is a pretty iconic performance by him. And in a way, this is kind of just, even before I'd seen it, this was just the film I thought of when I thought of David Cronenberg, having known a good amount about it before I saw it. It's an absolute staple in the body horror genre. Adam, what did you think of The Fly from 1986? Not the 50s one.
This is not the 50s one. Yes. Well, to cut to the chase, I absolutely adored this film. I was completely bowled over by it. I've not seen the 50s one, but it seems widely regarded that this is one of the finest remakes of all time, really building upon the initial concept with David Cronenberg taking things to the absolute extreme in every possible facet. One thing that I appreciated about this film from the get-go was how much time it took to establish the characters before the inevitable happens, because we all know what happens in this film. Like, before you put The Fly on, you know exactly what's going to happen. So it's a case of how well do they take you on that journey, and giving us so much time to spend with these characters in like more wholesome, ordinary moments, letting them build and develop and form tight chemistry together was just fantastic. Like, Jeff Goldblum is such a lovable young sort of boyish scientist who's very sort of, you know, nerdy and kind of virginal, and Geena Davis she's also incredibly charming, but she's initially more scheming because she's a journalist, and then she softens up to Jeff Goldblum and their romance blossoms in a really organic way. It's fantastic to see, and so it makes that gut-wrenching turn that much more horrible when it does happen. I mean, essentially this is kind of like a glorified Twilight Zone episode, right? It's a huge what if, and when you've got something that it could easily just be a 15-minute short, right, of just all of the gory highlights, filling it with this like these really vibrant lived-in characters was just so essential to that experience. Yeah,
the thing I think I liked most about this film was just how blunt and straightforward and simple the filmmaking to it was. It doesn't really do anything that flashy in terms of filmmaking outside of the special effects, which obviously are pretty flashy, and I guess spectacle's the wrong word, but spectacular in their own way. Yeah, you get the sense that's kind of where they spent the money, but there's a kind of blunt efficiency to the way the film is made. It kind of starts very abruptly and it ends quite abruptly, and it doesn't feel like it wastes too much time. I do like that it lets the characters breathe, I agree, because the main thrust of the story, the big event, he gets in the chamber and doesn't realise there's a fly in it. That happens, you know, about just before halfway through the film, so you actually get a good amount of time with the main two characters. I will say, I don't want to come off as negative because I actually love this film, but if there was one thing of that, it would be that first part of the film where I do feel that the tension, there's essentially three crucial characters to the film, right? I forget the name of the character, but Geena Davis's character has had this past relationship with this older guy who used to be a professor. He's just a creepy fucking dude who's like constantly making moves on her, and she's like, fuck off. And Jeff Goldblum is sort of jealous and suspicious, and I don't really feel like that element of the film is that strong earlier on in the film. The film actually kind of delivers on it much more than it really sets it up for me. Okay. Because I feel like once the film gets to its conclusion, you're like, right, now I get it.
Yeah.
Like, that is, okay, this makes complete sense in terms of character dynamic. I didn't quite really feel the tension. I think it's just that when he was getting in the pod, I was like, it's not that deep, man. Please.
Yeah. I know what you mean. He draws way too extreme of a conclusion from the information he seems to have, and then afterwards it's like all based off a hunch. But I guess in terms of like the tension of knowing where you're going, and what pushes this character to do something like that, even though it was perhaps a bit trivial, I still really...
I get it.
It didn't
I just feel like
anything for me.
Yeah, no, that's fair. To be honest, that's probably just that would probably be my sole criticism of the film for the most part. And then once you have that main event, from that point onwards, the film is like almost perfect. So he gets in the pod with the fly. He doesn't know what's happened, but he just feels amazing. And he's talking about, he feels like he's been reborn.
Yeah.
And he's getting all these strange powers, or he's got like this super strength. His like libido is through the roof.
He keeps eating and stuff. He's like ravenous in every way.
He's like stuffing his face. And then the way that the body horror builds up in terms of makeup is like absolutely so fucking cleverly done.
Yeah.
Because even though you know what's gonna happen, the way it subtly builds, like he's suddenly just like, his face just looks slightly discoloured.
Yes, and he's got like acne. He's suddenly like, he's got really terrible facial skin, but it's not that bad. Like he almost looked like he could have been like on drugs, like where people have like, was it meth face or whatever? Like they, it was like kind of that. It was subtle enough where he could just be ordinary, but
it's subtle enough that you notice it, but it's not like
overbearing.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, and then he just suddenly he looks like a fucking like a piece of mincemeat. Like immediately he like, because at first I was like, oh, am I noticing this? Even though I know what's going to happen, like I know he's going to start turning into like a fucking half fly, half human freak.
Yeah,
and then like, but even with that, I was like, oh wow, he's looking more and more off as the film goes on, and then obviously as the film progresses, he becomes more and more deformed. Yeah. And I mean, it kind of goes without saying, man, David Cronenberg and whoever was working in the special effects department just absolutely nails that stuff. It was so great.
Amazing. I love, talking about the way it builds up, I love the scenes where he's in the bathroom at different points, and on his journey he ends up back in the bathroom and essentially starts like dismantling himself. Like
those were the scariest part to me. That was like genuinely the scariest part of the film.
His like fingernails start falling out. He picks one out and like he bursts like a pus, like a blister under his fingernail, and it covers the mirror in goo. It's disgusting.
He just starts secreting ooze for a lot of the film.
Yeah, and then later on when he's really far gone, like teeth start falling out, like sometimes multiple at a time, just because it's such an outlandish situation. They do really great things to ground it as much as possible in a real experience, and I think that's something we all have some level of fear, particularly about losing teeth, and like a squeamishness about fingernails because we know how sensitive our fingernails are and stuff like that. There's just like tapping into very real horrors, like real fears, in order to escalate the grander sense of horror that is being achieved.
There's nothing scarier than that to me though, the bathroom scene, because like there's just something so inherently just like nightmarish. We've all been like, oh god, I fucking got a bit of shampoo in my eye, I'm never going to see again or whatever. We've all been there, like, or you feel a pain on your body that you're not used to, and you're like, oh fuck, this it?
When you stub a toe, it feels like you've broken your whole body. Like it feels like you've lost your toe.
But like, everyone's just been like scared for their health, right? And like the hypochondriac in me, just like, oh god, something's wrong, something's wrong with me. Like I feel like we've all been there, but to me, it's just like, being in the bathroom, looking at yourself in the mirror, and then there's just like bits of your body falling off. It's just like something is just so inherently fucked about that. Like. The bit where he's just having a conversation with her and his ear just falls off.
Oh god, yeah. Oh my god.
I was like, oh man.
And he's like kind of almost nonplussed by it. He's like, oh no.
There is almost a comedic element to the film because the character becomes so animated, and obviously it's Jeff Goldblum, so there is just kind of like an inherent sense of levity that he brings to it, along with his like dramatic chops. Like one of the funniest parts of the film to me was that ear bit, which was just, it was horrible but also just very funny. Or the bit where he picks up a donut, just goes blah, 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 and just like because he's a fly, so he vomits on his food before he eats it, and he doesn't even realise that he's done it because clearly he's been doing it, and he just goes, "Oh, that's disgusting." It's just like, That's fucking great.
I like the bit immediately following that where he's getting like kind of excited about his transformation. He kind of he gets to a point where he accepts it, and he's like, "Oh, let's discuss. Let's record this. We need to. I'm evolving. Let's see what happens." Like, and he like records him like dissolving food, and he's like narrating over the top, like, and so as a fly, I can eat solid food. I have to dissolve it first. Here's how
he says
it
it's
works.
going to be for like a kids show, and it's like horrifying.
Yeah, and then like it kind of cuts away from the footage and shows like the old boss, the old flame, watching it and going, and you can still hear it going on in the background, like, bleh, and he's like, oh my god, what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of wondering, like, thematically, I know it's an 80s film, so obviously the first comparison people draw to it, metaphorically, is like AIDS.
Yeah.
But the way it read to me, I sort of read a few interpretations of it, and I think mostly, you could certainly read it as the AIDS thing, but I actually think it's probably just more generally about aging and, like, disease. Because aging is, like, when you think about it, is like its own body horror, right? Because your body is transforming. I just feel like the metaphor works better because of that. It's about the physicality of it. That's what makes body horror particularly sort of skin crawling, like the way that your body changes. And that's kind of how I read it. Well, I don't know about you.
I think that's definitely an interpretation. I think the thing that lends the AIDS angle some more credence is there's, you know, a point in the story in which Gina Davis discovers she's pregnant. And there's an amazing dream sequence where she gives birth to like a giant maggot, and it's fucking horrifying. Like, and there's been no dream sequences up until that point, so it's like really visceral. Normally I find dream sequences, generally speaking, to be quite sort of tired, false ways of elevating tension. But in that, it really highlighted the potential danger she was in, as well as her own...
Okay, that makes sense.
As well as her own trauma. But yeah, in terms of it being about AIDS, it's like, yeah, the child inside her could be tainted. And that's an interesting thing that the film never really resolves, is she never makes a decision within the runtime of the film whether she keeps the child or not. And the dilemma she faces is still very real as the credits roll. So I like
that as an ambiguity there.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting choice. And again, I guess it kind of leaves the viewer with questions, not only about what will the character do, but kind of what would I do if I was in that situation. I mean, harder for us to relate specifically to that situation, but still, like, I guess again that could come into like disability, right? So you were talking about aging. Maybe it could be a metaphor for disability as well, like, and the moral quandary that people have if they discover that their child is going to be born, you know, maybe with Down syndrome or something like that. That's still a very relevant topic to this day.
It was his conflict on it that made me think of aging so much the more I think about it. Because the way he kind of like, he's like embracing it. He's like, oh no, this is like, I'm actually just like more myself, like I'm more the better self. It kind of reminds me how, like, you know, people, you know, oh, you know, I'm 65 years young. It's like, no, I mean, you're dying. Like, that is the reality of it. You know, however you try and sell it.
And he
like,
he describes it as a cancer as well. Like his whole body is like covered in cancers. Like he very, you know, literally tackles that possibility. But I guess that's kind of the clever thing about it, is that for such
I don't think there's one right reading.
Yeah. For such a specific film, you can draw so many parallels to real world events and experiences and phobias, really. Just in this unbelievably extravagant and violent analogy.
I guess light spoilers, because we need to talk about the sort of ending bit, right?
Yes, we do.
I was really, you know, expecting and, you know, hoping, but I had complete faith in the film that it would do this, that it had to get real nasty at the end, and it absolutely delivered. The film really does take a turn when he finally just he's transformed into this like hideous thing where he's in this state of metamorphosis, and his body is just falling apart, and he kidnaps Gina Davis from the hospital because he knows that she's pregnant, and he's sort of begging her. He wants to put himself into he's got like, what is it, like three?
He makes a third pod, and the idea is that he sort of uses the computer to program a possible solution for his ailment, and the computer decides, if you combine yourself with another human, you will gradually become more human.
Yeah, so he wants to essentially meld himself and he's like, we can be all in one body, blah blah blah, and she doesn't want to do it, and he like forces her into the pod, and then Mr. Dickhead, sexual harasser, shows up to save the day. And then you just have this great, I guess it's an action sequence in a way. It feels weird describing it as that, but it is. It's an action sequence. He burns his fucking arms off, and then he gets shot with a shotgun, and then he gets like put in a pod, and then the pod gets activated as he's halfway in and out of it. Yeah, the ending of the film is just an absolute banger, particularly the moment where he's come out of the pod after being halfway teleported and his body is being...
Oh, it's half metal.
Yeah, he's like, I don't exactly understand how it happened. I guess it's because there was like shrapnel in the pod.
No, it shows on the computer what he combines with, and because the teleporter was empty when he travelled, all he combined with was the teleporter itself. Right. So he, on an atomic level, he is bonded with the metal inside the teleporter.
And at this point, he's just completely like gone. But
deformed,
the most horrifying part of the film is he's crawling out, and you're like, well, he's fucked, right? That's it.
Yeah.
And then she points the gun at him, and then he puts his sort of deformed claw up, and he like points it at his face. So he's still himself.
Yeah.
Within this like horrible shell of a creature.
Yeah.
And it's really fucked. Great ending to the film.
I was completely on board with the film already at that point. Like, it completely won me over, but that cemented it as just one of the most heartbreaking and powerful endings you could ever experience watching a horror, because
it is very bleak.
Because they do such a great job across the film of having his character go from such like a lovable, charming young man into this kind of despicable, evil douchebag, and then like a literal monster. And it's all such like it's all so well sort of telegraphed and established. Like, it never feels jarring that he's made this journey. It all feels natural. And then right at the end, we're reminded that he's human, and that he's made the single most awful mistake you could possibly make, and that there was never any hope that he could ever change it. And you see his mangled body and those like black buggy eyes. It looks helpless. You can't imagine feeling sorry for something that looks so hideous, and yet it almost has this anthropomorphic quality to it, and it's so cleverly done. He just wants the pain to end. He wants his mistake to be
because it's also at this point in the story, he's sort of been determined, so determined. There's a point where he does kind of give up. He's like, oh god, I need help, and then after that he kind of bounces back. He's like, no, and then he has this psychotic thing, and that's how he ends up kidnapping her, where he's like, no, I'm gonna fix this, or now I'm not evolved, I thought I was half human, but I'm actually more insect.
I'm 100%. I'm a new species now. I'm 100% Brundle flight.
And then in his last moment, he goes back to that. No, I'm fucked. Like he can't be helped. So he just has to
dying moment of humanity, and you realise like it. And again, it's that moment of like grounding you in the reality of what he's experiencing. We could never imagine doing something like that to ourselves, but then you're suddenly thrust into the what if. Like, can you imagine that? Just that inescapable nature of that horror. You make one mistake and there is just no going back. There is nothing you can do. Those particles, those genes are just mixed, and they will always be mixed, and you will always be broken, and he just gets more and more broken as the film goes on. It's fucking heartbreaking. And even they show her blowing his brains out at the end, like they fully show it.
Great money shot for the final moment.
It's a great money shot, but it's still sad. You don't watch it. You don't watch it, and I didn't watch it personally and go, "Oh, what the fuck." I watched it like, "Oh man, that's
it doesn't break the mood,
that's a man dying right there. That's just sad."
But it's also such a relief as well.
Yeah,
it's like
his suffering's over.
It's almost like, oh, thank God, at the end when he finally gets ended.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a great moment of after like such a sort of violent and like he's not acting like himself. It's a great sort of moment. Well, not great, but a very sort of sad and poignant moment of humanity after like this kind of insane twisted personality where he kind of becomes completely, in every sense unrecognizable. Yeah, because he's also just completely unrecognizable when he's just like arm wrestling douchebags at the bar, compared to the character you originally meet. He's fundamentally changed, and you still get that sense of his original personality coming through, but it doesn't fit. And then in the end, nothing about him fits. He's just completely like gone, and that one sort of core aspect of him is alive, and all it can say is, you know, fucking kill me. Pretty bleak. Don't drink and teleport, kids. That I think was the message that Cronenberg intended for all of us.
Don't teleport. Don't teleport with your pets.
Yeah, to all that. Yeah, you know, in the original short story, it's very, very different. I actually was looking this up the other day, and he gets a fly and he tries to teleport himself again. He gets mixed up with the house cat as well. So I don't know how you let the cat in there by accident. So you'd think you'd notice that. A fly, fair enough.
So he keeps cocking it up.
Yeah, yeah, and then he kills himself with a machine press, which is...
What? He like crushes himself to death.
Well, he gets his wife to do it so that it crushes the deformed parts of him, and then she claims that she murdered him. But then, like, that's like the instigating part of the story, and then the short story is sort of about finding out what actually happened, and then they discover.
I see.
It's actually very, very different.
That's weird.
Short story. And I know there was a different script for this as well, and then Cronenberg rewrote that script, so it is quite original in a way.
Yeah.
Adam, what would you rate The Fly?
I mean, it's an easy 9 out of 10 for me. I almost want to give it more, but I will reserve a 10 perhaps for the next time I watch it, like to really let it cement in my head the quality of this film. But yeah, this made such an instant impact on me. Every decision the film made felt right, and it felt satisfying. You know, watching like filmmakers and everyone involved seemed to know exactly what they were doing and how to get the absolute maximum out of the concept. The design, I don't think we've talked enough about how brilliant the design for the final Brundlefly is, when his like
and the pods. The pods are iconic.
The pods
as well.
are really cool, but like when his face like falls off and like the bug eyes emerge and he like his legs are like arched backwards, he is just this completely hideous creature. It's genius. It's genius.
Yeah, I know you don't particularly, you know, enjoy body horror.
Horror, yeah.
I guess it is like very visceral. I guess that's the thing, right? So when it's done right.
I found it easy enough to get along with. I think, you know, maybe my stomach has been eased over the years. I think the thing
steel lined.
I struggle more with, like, I think gun-related stuff or stuff like that. Like, because this is so kind of fantastical, I was able to kind of divorce myself from it a bit, so I didn't feel too sick watching it. But it was more the existential dread that got me with this, and that kind of horrible playing with the possibility in your mind, like knowing you've made this irreversible mistake. That was so powerful.
I'm feeling the 9, but I'm gonna go 8 because I feel like I need to watch it again.
Okay.
Because I feel like the film, as I said, I kind of opened with my real only complaint, which was that the first part of the film was good, and I'm glad that it let the film breathe, but I don't feel like it set up the three-way character tension as effectively as it could have. But outside of that, I mean, there's a reason this is a classic. It has that real sort of Shakespearean tragedy quality to it.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just so satisfying in so many ways. Really does, like, in terms of body horror is like something that is very difficult to pull off, not only because it's like expensive and obviously at the time as well, but when it's done right, it is like one of the most uniquely visceral genres, deeply unpleasant in a way. It scratches an itch that, when it's done right, it is genuinely scary to me. Because there's so much horror films, you know, that's like ghosts and demons and serial killers and all this, and that can all be good, but it doesn't scare me in this. Even if something like that is scary, it doesn't scare me in the same way as body horror. So I've got to give it credit for that, because it is just the quintessential body horror film. And yeah, I would recommend it to pretty much anyone. I feel like there's something about this that just feels uniquely accessible on top of all of that.
I think it's the characterization, you know, and it's simplistic. It's like, I think you said that before, like, there's such an efficiency with the way that the ideas are communicated. It's like, bang, man invents teleporters, he is this guy, he's lovable, he's charming, his girlfriend is lovable and charming, and then it all goes horribly fucking wrong. And and I think that simplicity lends itself to a wide audience. I'm really glad. I mean, you know, I would never have put money back in the day on this being one of the biggest, most widely loved horror films of all time, but I'm very glad that it is.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, also, you know, everybody likes Jeff Goldblum, and you know, he's great to watch.
He's so good.
That has been our review of The Fly. If you've enjoyed this review, if you made it this far, if you liked the video, give it a like. If you dislike the video, give it a dislike. And if you have any kind or hurtful words, there is a comment box below. If you want to see more Hooptober, shit, subscribe, and we will be back. We're probably going to end up finishing the Hooptober stuff in November, but
yeah,
fuck it.
Ideally,
live your life.
Ideally by mid-November, we'll have it all done. Yeah.
I don't see any of you motherfuckers doing video reviews, so fuck out of here.
Yeah.
I've been moving house and Hooptobering. That's called real G shit. Okay?
You got really hard with the ending, man.
I'm Rupert.
I'm Adam.
And we'll catch you next time for the next Hooptober review. Peace.
Peace.